passion is just women and men empowering women to understand that we can work through pelvic floor weakness. It doesn't mean that we cannot do any exercise after that. So everybody has got someone that's at high risk in our classes, so it's up to us to bring that awareness to pelvic floor and just make it, like I said before, just something that you just want to talk about. We need to talk about pelvic floor stuff more. So women heal best when they understand what's going on in their bodies. So if you explain to them what's going on, they're buying. I mean, basically they're like, oh, that makes sense to me. So instead of just giving them an exercise and not really telling them why, if we can actually explain why we're giving people the exercises, and it's going to make a huge amount of difference with these women's lives. If it hasn't happened from trauma, so childbirth, surgery, what it will tend to be, and being very general about this, is poor body mechanics. So what people are doing on a daily basis is going to affect a lot of the pelvic floor problems. So I am having a wee talk. Okay, your pelvic floor works on supply and demand. Okay, so basically, if we're not putting any if we're not causing it to work, then it's just not really going to do anything. So inaction is the worst possible thing. So especially from a postnatal point of view, like postnatal women, they spend so much time sitting just because we're feeding, and it's just, or like carrying babies. So we go from a sitting, so a complete inaction of that pelvic floor, so there's no demand in it, to something which is very high demand. So carrying a car seat, lifting a stroller out of the back of the car. So the more that we can educate women on movement patterns for your pelvic floor, then the more that they're going to get out of, the more understanding that they're going to get out of it. So also, what happens when there's too much demand? So we all know what happens when there's too much demand on your pelvic floor. So it's trying to get to that point that we don't, like in classes, that we're not constantly putting that demand on that pelvic floor. If that woman is not in a position to be able to handle that, and if our pelvic floor is not able to handle that, so it's just making sure that we give options. But I think that if we can control what's going on with our core, then so many exercises can be safe, but it's that core control which is the most important thing. So from a group point of view, because I thought there'd be a few more group people in here, so what we can do from a group point of view is coaching breathing. Breathing is one of the most important things that you can be doing, so we'll do a little bit of that in a second. Prompting women when it comes to group settings as well. So obviously one-on-one it's very easy to do, but just those prompts coming up the pelvic floor, and it's just getting those right prompts as well. And then understanding, it's you understanding your own body, and then us being able to understand what's going on in other people's bodies as well. So diaphragm and pelvic floor, like I said before, they're twins, like they work together, so that's why breathing is so important. So I was just talking to Ange before, and we were basically saying that your 360 breathing, it's also called connection breathing. It's like doing a bicep curl for your pelvic floor, is how I like to look at it. So your pelvic floor muscles are muscles just like anything else. If we don't work our muscles, then they're not going to get strong. So
what I'd like you to do is breathing in. I want you to be able to feel your hands pushing out. Your ribs want to push your hands out. Front, sides, and back. Hence 360 breathing. So what we're going to do here is, yes, you're going to breathe into these ribs again, and we're going to have that same kind of beautiful diaphragm breathing. functional breathing. And what we want out of that is I want you to just take your attention down to your pelvic floor, those muscles that support all of your organs and help you not wee and poo yourself when you don't want to. And what I'd like you to try and notice is that when you breathe in, you can feel a slight downward pressure through your pelvic floor where it's kind of relaxing and moving down in conjunction with that diaphragm moving down and the rib cage inflating and everything going that way. And then when we exhale, it just comes back to normal, just comes back to neutral. It's not a pelvic floor contraction, it's not a lift, it's not anything. This is just natural movement of your pelvic floor. And for people that have never done this kind of breathing before, it can take a little while to even be able to feel that natural, that thing.
Because basically when we go into this, it's just a really big anterior pelvic tilt, which I'll talk about a wee bit more. But yeah, again, like just no core control. So rib flare is super important. If you see rib flare with someone, then you know that they're not using their core whatsoever, basically. That was very general, but if your pelvic floor dysfunction is not a result of trauma, childbirth, surgery, etc., it's long-term biomechanics. Postures, like if we can start cueing posture, then it's going to make a huge amount of difference to the pressure that's going on people's pelvic floor. So the things that affect pelvic floor dysfunction, your kinetic chains are basically kind of like what's going on right the way through your body. So what's going on from your feet to your head, okay? So your head. Anterior pelvic tilt. Okay, so anterior pelvic tilt, you guys might see this with some of your clients or with people walking down the street. It's basically, hold on, this, okay. So this is anterior pelvic tilt. So big lumbar curve through there, rib flare sticking out. Head is normally forward, but sometimes it's not. The issues with this from a pelvic floor point of view of what we talked about before, and we talked about the rib flare. You do this kind of like the entire time, nothing is going on through here, and we are loading these suckers so much. So that lower back, short, super tight muscles, kind of like your abdominals, long, heaps of weakness there. So then short and tight through here, long and weak through these suckers as well. So long and weak abdominals, tight erector spinae down here, tight hip flexors, which can result, so if you've got tight hip flexors, it also works on forward head posture. So if someone always has their head sticking forward, a lot of pressure down on their pelvic floor, constant pressure down on their pelvic floor. So this doesn't matter whether it's posterior pelvic tilt or anterior. The minute we've got that forward head posture, like we're just putting that pressure down there. So a super cool cue for anyone is just pull your chin back, like literally kind of like just, if you can get someone to pull their chin back, that is going to make a huge amount of difference to their movement patterns. So sitting, worst possible thing for your pelvic floor. Gives you really tight, weak glutes because we'll tuck that butt under. Super tight hamstrings. So this is a problem because it's too much pressure down on your pelvic floor the entire time, and obviously kind of like looking at that super fantastic head posture as well. So it just compounds everything. So it's because we don't have any stability through our core. Okay, so normally like it's come from prenatal and then moving into postnatal, so we spend a lot of time sitting when we're postnatal, but also we just don't have any stability through here, we don't have any control, and your body wants to give you a little bit of stability. So what it does, if we aren't able to stabilize through here, we use this sucker and we stabilize that way, okay? So if you see anybody start to do that when they get put under load, there's not a lot of strength in that core. So it's just these wee cues that you can look at, and just so it's just being aware. I think that's the more that you can be aware of this and be like, oh, she's in anterior pelvic tilt, or oh, she's in posterior pelvic tilt, that means X, Y, and Z. then it's a lot easier just to cue these things. Basically, like self-awareness is huge. So teaching somebody how to control their body is massive, but getting them to understand why they're doing it, and that's the thing is we try and get across. I'm not going to get somebody down on the floor and doing a dead bug until I can explain why they're doing it. So it's just getting into that habit. But cool, if you're one-on-one or even in a group setting, if you do a bit of core stuff at the end, like explain the movement pattern. If you tend to round out your back and you load your back, I want you to do this. If you tend to tuck your bum under, I want you to do this. I'm just trying to get into that habit. So self-awareness, people, self-improvement, asking for help if you need it. So if you're not sure about anything, like me and Ange, and there's, oh God, there's physios out there, but like we love obviously talking about this kind of stuff and we're really passionate about it. So it's just, if you're not sure about certain exercises, then it's just fire us through emails and just be like, hey, I'm doing this, is this all good? Yeah. And then understanding that we're in a position to make a huge amount of difference in people's lives, so positive and negative. It's just, we're in such a privileged position to take people through exercise and movement patterns, but we're also in a position that we can cause a huge amount of harm. And I think it's trying to get that across as well, and it's realizing that we can't be blasé about certain movement patterns because it can cause prolapse and it can cause a lot of pelvic floor weakness. So it's it's just
being aware without being terrified.
Yeah, we don't need to be terrified. We just do so much stuff. Yeah.
Aware of it. As long as it's in your mind,
Yeah.
you're likely to catch something if something